Britain's Category A prison system exists for one reason above all others: certainty. It is the highest level of incarceration in the UK, reserved for individuals considered so dangerous that their escape would pose a serious threat to the public or the state itself. This classification is not about punishment alone. It is about risk, control, and prevention. Category A is not a prison. It is a status. When an individual is classified as Category A, the system is declaring that trust is no longer an option. Every decision that follows is shaped by that assumption. Where they are held, how they move, who they see, and how closely they are watched all change instantly. This classification is not assigned lightly. It is the result of intelligence assessments, criminal history, behavior in custody, and perceived capacity for harm. Terrorism, organized crime leadership, extreme violence, and repeated destabilization of other prisons often lead to this status. Once applied, Category A becomes the defining feature of an inmate's existence. Unlike lower security classifications, Category A prisoners are not housed together in a single facility. Instead, they are distributed across a small number of high-security prisons specifically designed to manage them. Each prison operates differently, but the underlying philosophy remains the same. Control comes first. Movement within Category A prisons is limited and intentional. Prisoners are not allowed to circulate freely, even within their own wings. Unlock times are short. Routes are fixed. Schedules are staggered to prevent overlap and minimize contact. Every movement is purposeful. Every interaction is observed. This system is designed to prevent coordination. The UK Prison Service learned long ago that influence, not violence, is often the greatest threat. A single individual with the ability to communicate freely can destabilize an entire prison. Category A prisons are built to prevent that from happening. Association is tightly regulated. Prisoners may be allowed limited interaction, but these decisions are constantly reviewed. Relationships are monitored. Patterns are tracked. If intelligence suggests that influence is forming, the system responds quickly. Transfers occur quietly. Schedules change. Contact is reduced. The system does not wait for disruption. This proactive approach is one of the defining characteristics of the UK's Category A model. Rather than reacting to incidents, the system is designed to prevent the conditions that allow them to occur in the first place. From the outside, this can make Category A prisons appear calm. There are few large-scale disturbances. Escapes are virtually non-existent. Incidents are rare and usually contained quickly. But calm does not mean ease. Inside, the atmosphere is heavy with control. Silence is common. Routine dominates daily life. Personal freedom is reduced to the smallest possible margin. Cells are designed for containment, not comfort. Space is limited. Furniture is fixed. Personal possessions are restricted. Everything inside the cell is assessed through a single lens: risk. Even small items are considered carefully. Nothing is allowed that could be repurposed, manipulated, or weaponized. Convenience is secondary to security. For prisoners, this creates a sense of constant evaluation. Behavior is logged. Compliance is recorded. Every interaction contributes to an ongoing assessment that determines future conditions. Progress is possible, but it is slow. Category A status is reviewed regularly, but removal is rare. Prisoners must demonstrate sustained compliance over long periods, often years. Even then, assessments remain cautious. One incident can reset the process entirely. This reality shapes how prisoners behave. Some withdraw completely, keeping interaction to an absolute minimum. Others attempt to navigate the system carefully, following rules precisely while seeking small improvements in conditions. A few resist openly, accepting further restriction as inevitable. None of these paths offer easy relief. Mental health services exist within Category A prisons, but access is constrained by security. Appointments require escort. Sessions are limited. Treatment focuses on stability rather than transformation. The system prioritizes control over rehabilitation. This does not mean rehabilitation is ignored entirely. Education, therapy, and structured activities are available to some extent, but they operate within strict boundaries. Security considerations override all other factors. If a program introduces risk, it is modified or removed. For staff, working within the Category A system requires constant vigilance. Officers are trained to recognize subtle changes in behavior: a shift in routine, a refusal that seems minor, an interaction that feels out of place. Experience matters. The most effective officers are often the least visible. They do not rely on force or intimidation. They rely on consistency, clarity, and awareness. In a Category A prison, inconsistency is dangerous. Staff must enforce rules without escalation. Too much flexibility creates opportunity. Too much rigidity creates resentment. Maintaining balance requires skill and patience. The pressure is constant. Officers are aware that any failure could have serious consequences. An escape, a coordinated attack, a breakdown of control. These outcomes are unacceptable within the Category A framework. As a result, procedures are followed strictly. Decisions are documented. Deviations are questioned. Accountability is continuous. This creates a system that is highly effective but emotionally demanding. It prioritizes public safety over individual autonomy. This choice is not without cost. Prolonged isolation affects cognition, emotion, and social capacity. Prisoners adapt, but adaptation often involves emotional suppression. Displays of vulnerability are avoided. Trust erodes over time. When prisoners eventually leave Category A conditions, whether through transfer or release, these effects do not disappear instantly. The system manages risk effectively, but it does not erase consequence. Critics argue that the Category A model creates long-term harm that undermines rehabilitation. Supporters argue that the risks involved justify extreme measures. The UK prison system continues to operate within this tension. Category A prisons do not attempt to resolve the debate. They exist because the system has decided that containment is necessary, regardless of discomfort. They are not designed to inspire hope. They are designed to prevent failure. And in that purpose, they are uncompromising. At the heart of Britain's Category A prison system is intelligence. Not the kind gathered after something goes wrong, but the kind collected continuously, quietly, and often invisibly. Every high-security prison operating under the Category A framework relies on intelligence units whose sole purpose is to identify risk before it becomes action. These units monitor behavior patterns rather than isolated incidents. A single rule breach may mean little on its own. A series of small changes, however, can signal something far more serious. Altered routines, shifts in mood, new associations. Even silence can be meaningful. Information comes from many sources. Officers report observations. Communications are monitored. Movements are logged. External intelligence agencies may contribute when national security is involved. Nothing exists in isolation. A prisoner assessed as stable 1 year may be reclassified the next if circumstances change. A family connection. A political event. A rumor of coordination. The system reacts not only to behavior, but to potential. This constant reassessment is one of the most defining features of the Category A system. It creates a sense of uncertainty for prisoners, even those who follow rules consistently. Good behavior does not guarantee improvement. It merely avoids deterioration. Progress, when it comes, is incremental. Prisoners may move through internal stages that offer slightly more association or access to activities. These changes are closely monitored. Any sign of regression results in immediate review. The system is designed to be reversible. Trust is not built quickly, and it is never absolute. This approach is shaped by past failures. The UK prison system has experienced moments where individuals underestimated as low risk went on to orchestrate violence, escapes, or influence networks from inside custody. These incidents left lasting marks on policy. Category A procedures are the result of those lessons. Within this system, prisons operate with a shared philosophy but distinct operational styles. Facilities like Whitemoor, Frankland, and Sutton each implement Category A controls differently, shaped by architecture, staffing, and institutional culture. Some emphasize surveillance. Others emphasize separation. Some rely heavily on structured routines. Others use isolation more aggressively. What unites them is the belief that influence must be contained as carefully as physical movement. Communication is one of the most tightly regulated aspects of Category A imprisonment. Letters are screened. Phone calls are monitored. Visits are limited and supervised. Even approved communication can be withdrawn if intelligence suggests risk. This level of control extends beyond prison walls. The system is acutely aware that influence does not require physical presence. Ideas, instructions, and networks can operate remotely. The Category A framework exists to interrupt those channels. For prisoners, this creates a sense of disconnection that goes beyond physical confinement. The psychological impact of sustained high security conditions is significant. Isolation affects sleep, concentration, and emotional regulation. Anxiety and depression are common. Coping mechanisms vary, but none fully offset the environment. Mental health services operate within these constraints, focusing on stability rather than transformation. The goal is to prevent deterioration, not necessarily to facilitate growth. The system does not promise healing. It promises control. For staff, intelligence-driven management requires constant coordination. Information must be shared accurately and responsibly. Misinterpretation can lead to unnecessary restriction or missed warning signs. The pressure to get it right is intense. Officers, psychologists, security staff, and administrators work within a network of checks and balances. Decisions are rarely made by individuals alone. Committees review classifications. Assessments are documented. Justifications are required. This bureaucracy slows change, but it also prevents impulsive decisions. The system values caution over speed. From a distance, this can appear impersonal. But within the Category A framework, impersonality is considered a safeguard. Emotional decision-making is viewed as a liability. Consistency is the priority. This consistency extends to discipline. Rule breaches are addressed swiftly and proportionally. The response is not designed to humiliate or provoke. It is designed to restore control. Privileges are removed. Movement is restricted. Observation increases. The message is clear. The system does not negotiate with defiance. Despite this rigidity, the Category A system is not static. Policies evolve. Technologies improve. Surveillance becomes more precise. Risk assessment tools become more sophisticated. But these changes refine the system rather than transform it. The core philosophy remains intact. Containment before trust. Prevention before reaction. Certainty before flexibility. This philosophy shapes not only how prisoners are managed, but how the public perceives high security incarceration. Category A prisons operate largely out of sight, shielded from scrutiny by necessity and design. They are not meant to be visible. They are meant to function. Critics argue that this lack of visibility allows harmful practices to persist unchecked. Supporters argue that transparency must be balanced against security. The truth lies somewhere between. Category A prisons exist at the intersection of fear and responsibility. They are built because society demands protection. They operate because risk is taken seriously. They are not comfortable institutions to examine, but they are essential to understanding how modern Britain manages its most dangerous offenders. Because behind the walls, beneath the procedures, and beyond the classifications lies a fundamental question. How much control is enough? And at what cost? Progression within Britain's Category A prison system is deliberately slow. This is not a system designed to reward short-term compliance. It is designed to test consistency over time. Months mean little. Years matter. Prisoners classified as Category A are reviewed regularly, but these reviews are cautious by design. Panels assess behavior, intelligence reports, psychological evaluations, and perceived risk. Even positive assessments rarely lead to immediate change. The question is never simply whether a prisoner is behaving well. The question is whether they can be trusted not to exploit opportunity. This distinction defines the system. Good behavior is expected. It is the baseline. What matters is the absence of manipulation, influence, or strategic compliance. The system assumes that those who pose the greatest risk are often the most patient. As a result, progression pathways are narrow. Prisoners may move into slightly less restrictive regimes within the same prison. Association may increase marginally. Access to activities may expand cautiously. Each step is monitored closely. Any regression, however minor, can halt or reverse progress. A single incident can outweigh years of stability. Intelligence suggesting renewed influence can override positive behavior instantly. This creates a reality where advancement feels fragile. For prisoners, this uncertainty is one of the most psychologically taxing aspects of Category A status. There is no clear timeline, no guaranteed milestones, no defined endpoint. Hope becomes conditional. Some prisoners respond by disengaging emotionally, refusing to invest in the possibility of progression. Others remain hyper-focused on compliance, measuring every action carefully. Both responses reflect adaptation to an environment where outcomes are never assured. The system views this uncertainty as necessary. Certainty, it believes, creates complacency. Complacency creates opportunity. The Category A framework is built to deny opportunity. Despite these controls, the system is not without controversy. Critics point to cases where prisoners remain under Category A restrictions long after their risk appears to have diminished. They argue that excessive caution undermines fairness and rehabilitation. Supporters counter that risk assessment is inherently imperfect, that underestimating danger carries consequences that society is unwilling to accept. This tension plays out quietly, through reviews, appeals, and policy discussions. Rarely does it reach public attention. When it does, it is often following failure. Failures within the Category A system are infrequent, but they shape policy disproportionately. Escapes, coordinated violence, or evidence of influence networks provoke immediate scrutiny. Procedures are tightened. Restrictions increase. Flexibility decreases. The system responds to failure by becoming more conservative. This creates a ratchet effect. Control increases more easily than it decreases. Once a restriction is justified, removing it requires extraordinary confidence. Confidence is rare. This dynamic explains why Category A status often becomes long-term, even when original circumstances change. The system remembers past risks longer than it forgives them. For prisoners eventually downgraded from Category A, the transition is difficult. Years of isolation and control leave lasting effects. Decision-making becomes challenging. Social interaction feels unfamiliar. The habits built under extreme restriction do not dissolve easily. Reintegration, when it occurs, is cautious and incomplete. Former Category A prisoners may move to lower security prisons, but they often remain subject to enhanced monitoring. The system does not forget easily. For those released directly from high security conditions, adjustment to the outside world can be overwhelming. Noise, crowds, choice, and unpredictability can feel threatening rather than liberating. Freedom, after years of containment, requires relearning. These outcomes raise questions about the long-term effectiveness of extreme security. Does it reduce risk permanently, or merely suppress it temporarily? Does prolonged isolation protect society, or defer challenges to a later stage? There are no simple answers. The Category A system operates on the assumption that immediate safety outweighs uncertain future outcomes. It prioritizes prevention over possibility. This philosophy extends to how prisons are staffed and managed. Officers working with Category A prisoners often remain in those roles for extended periods. Experience is valued. Familiarity with risk patterns matters. However, prolonged exposure to high-security environments affects staff as well. Vigilance becomes habitual. Emotional distance becomes a coping mechanism. The boundary between work and personal life can blur. The prison's intensity does not end at the gate. Despite these pressures, the system continues largely unchanged. Adjustments occur incrementally. Policies are refined. Technologies improve. But the core remains. Britain's Category A prison system is built on the belief that some risks cannot be mitigated through trust or rehabilitation alone. That containment is sometimes the only option. This belief is uncomfortable, but it persists. It persists because the cost of being wrong feels too high.
From the outside, Category A prisons appear quiet and controlled. They do not invite attention, they do not seek understanding. Their effectiveness is measured in absence, the absence of escapes, the absence of large-scale violence, the absence of headlines. This absence is their success, but absence also conceals impact. The human cost of prolonged restriction is difficult to quantify. The long-term effects ripple outward, beyond prison walls, into families, communities, and institutions. The system acknowledges this cost, but does not prioritize resolving it. It prioritizes safety. As long as society demands certainty, category or prisons will exist as they are cautious, restrictive, and uncompromising. They are not designed to answer moral questions. They are designed to prevent catastrophic ones. One of the least visible aspects of Britain as category or prison system is how deeply it relies on prediction rather than reaction. The system does not wait for harm to occur before responding. It attempts to forecast it, to anticipate where pressure may build, and to remove the conditions that allow it to surface. This predictive approach shapes every operational decision. Risk assessments are not static documents reviewed once and forgotten. They are living profiles, constantly updated with new information. A prisoner's behavior today is weighed against their history, intelligence reports, and the broader context surrounding them. External events matter, political developments matter. Even unrelated incidents in other prisons can influence how risk is interpreted. Nothing exists in isolation. This creates a system where caution compounds. When uncertainty appears, the response is almost always restriction rather than release. The logic is simple. It is easier to justify tightening control than explaining failure. As a result, category or prisons develop a culture of restraint. Decisions are on the side of containment. Opportunities are limited not because they are unsafe in isolation, but because they introduce variables. Variables create risk. This mindset extends to innovation. New programs, new approaches, or experimental rehabilitation efforts face significant scrutiny in category environments. Even well-intentioned initiatives can be delayed or rejected if they introduce unpredictability. Change is slow by design. The system's architects understand that high-security prisons are not laboratories. They are safeguards. Their purpose is not to test possibilities, but to enforce boundaries. For prisoners, this means life unfolds within narrow parameters. The future is not something to plan actively, but something to endure patiently. Time is measured not in progress, but in stability. Stability becomes the goal. This redefinition of success is subtle but profound. In most prison environments, progress is associated with movement, lower security, increased privileges, preparation for release. In category or prisons, progress often means simply avoiding regression. Remaining where you are becomes an achievement. This inversion affects motivation. Some prisoners disengage from the idea of improvement altogether. Others cling to the hope that consistent behavior will eventually be recognized, even if recognition comes slowly. The system acknowledges effort, but it does not reward optimism. From an administrative perspective, this caution is justified. History has shown that individuals capable of extreme harm often possess patience, discipline, and strategic thinking. They understand systems and exploit gaps. Category or prisons exist to close those gaps. But closing gaps also closes opportunities for growth. The system is aware of this trade-off, but accepts it as necessary. Rehabilitation, in this context, is secondary to security. This prioritization has consequences that extend beyond individual prisoners. It shapes institutional culture, public perception, and policy debates. Category or prisons are rarely discussed openly. When they are mentioned, it is often in the context of fear or outrage. The nuance of daily operation is lost. Complexity is replaced by caricature. This invisibility protects the system from scrutiny, but it also limits understanding. Public debate tends to focus on extremes, whether prisons are too harsh or too lenient. The reality of category incarceration exists in a quieter space, where decisions are made incrementally, without public input. The system does not seek approval, it seeks effectiveness. For staff, this creates a professional environment that values adherence over initiative. Officers are encouraged to follow procedure precisely. Deviating from protocol, even with good intentions, can carry consequences. This reinforces a culture of compliance. Within that culture, discretion exists, but it is tightly bounded. Officers may exercise judgment in how they interact with prisoners, but not in whether rules apply. The framework is fixed. This rigidity can feel frustrating, but it also provides clarity. Everyone knows the limits. Expectations are explicit. Ambiguity is minimized. This clarity contributes to the relative stability of category or prisons. There is little room for misinterpretation. Authority is clearly defined, power flows in one direction. For prisoners accustomed to environments where dominance is negotiated through force or influence, this clarity can be disarming. Traditional hierarchies dissolve, reputation loses relevance. The system does not recognize informal authority. This erosion of inmate power structures is intentional. Category of prisons are designed to prevent the formation of leadership networks that could undermine control. By fragmenting association and limiting communication, the system ensures that no single individual can exert sustained influence. This fragmentation, however, comes at a psychological cost. Humans are social by nature. Prolonged separation affects identity, self-perception, and emotional regulation. Prisoners adapt, but adaptation often involves emotional numbing. Feelings are suppressed to avoid vulnerability. Relationships become transactional or non-existent. Over time, this can alter how individuals relate to others permanently. The system acknowledges these effects in theory, but addresses them cautiously in practice. Expanding association or autonomy to mitigate psychological harm introduces new risks. Risk remains the overriding concern. This tension between safety and humanity defines the category as system. It is not resolved, it is managed. The system does not claim to be humane in the conventional sense, it claims to be necessary. As societal attitudes toward punishment and rehabilitation evolve, category of prisons remain resistant to rapid change. Their mandate is narrow and uncompromising. They exist to contain those deemed uncontainable elsewhere. This mandate shapes everything.
It shapes architecture, staffing, policy, and daily routine. It shapes how prisoners think, how staff operate, and how the public perceives danger. Category A prisons are not meant to inspire confidence through visibility. They inspire confidence through absence, the absence of escapes, the absence of chaos, the absence of headlines. This absence reassures the public, even if they rarely think about why. But beneath that reassurance lies a system that demands constant sacrifice, of flexibility, of hope, of human connection. Whether that sacrifice is justified remains a question without consensus. What is clear is that Britain's Category A prison system reflects a broader societal choice, a choice to prioritize certainty over possibility, control over compassion, prevention over redemption. It is a system built not on optimism, but on caution. And as long as fear of failure outweighs faith in change, it will continue to operate exactly as it does now. In the end, Britain's Category A prison system is less about walls and locks than it is about philosophy. It represents a decision made long before any individual prisoner arrives at a gate. A decision that some risks are too great, some consequences too severe, and some individuals too dangerous to manage through trust alone. This system does not exist because society believes it is perfect. It exists because society fears the alternative. Category A prisons are built on the assumption that failure is unacceptable, that one escape, one coordinated act of violence, or one misuse of influence could undermine public safety in ways that cannot be undone. Every policy, every restriction, and every procedure flows from that assumption. The result is a system designed to eliminate uncertainty. But eliminating uncertainty requires sacrifice. It demands the removal of autonomy, the narrowing of possibility, and the constant suppression of human unpredictability. For those held within Category A conditions, life becomes defined not by who they are, but by what they are not allowed to do. They are not allowed freedom of movement. They are not allowed unmonitored communication. They are not allowed trust. This absence shapes identity over time. Prisoners adapt to this reality in different ways. Some grow quieter. Others become rigid. Many learn to manage their emotions carefully, aware that expression itself can be interpreted as risk. Survival becomes less about resistance and more about endurance. Endurance, in this system, is its own form of compliance. For staff, the system imposes a different burden. Officers working within Category A prisons are asked to maintain vigilance without hostility, authority without cruelty, and control without escalation. They operate in environments where the margin for error is minimal and the consequences of misjudgment are significant. The pressure is constant. Yet the system depends on their consistency, on their ability to enforce rules without emotion, to observe without assuming, and to act without hesitation when risk appears. The professionalism required is immense, and often invisible. Both prisoners and staff exist within a framework that prioritizes safety above all else. Personal needs, emotional well-being, and long-term outcomes are acknowledged, but always secondary. This prioritization reflects a broader societal choice. Britain's Category A prison system is not simply a response to crime. It is a reflection of how the state defines danger, responsibility, and control. It shows where society draws its hardest lines. These lines are not drawn lightly. They are shaped by history, by past failures, and by collective fear. Each restriction represents a lesson learned, often through costly experience. And once those lessons are encoded into policy, they are difficult to reverse. The system is cautious because it has been taught to be cautious. It is rigid because flexibility has failed before. It is slow to change because speed has proven dangerous. This does not mean the system is beyond critique. Questions about long-term isolation, psychological harm, and the erosion of rehabilitation remain unresolved. Concerns about fairness, proportionality, and human dignity continue to surface. But within the Category A framework, these questions rarely lead to immediate change. The system is not designed to evolve quickly. It is designed to hold steady. As a result, Category A prisons exist in a kind of institutional stillness. They function day after day, largely unchanged, quietly fulfilling their role. The public rarely sees them. Politicians rarely discuss them unless something goes wrong. Their success is measured in silence. Yet silence should not be mistaken for simplicity. Behind the walls, lives continue. Thoughts persist. Consequences accumulate. The effects of long-term containment extend beyond the prison, into families, communities, and eventually back into society. Even the most controlled systems cannot fully contain impact. When prisoners leave Category A conditions, whether through reclassification or release, they carry the imprint of that environment with them. The habits formed under extreme restriction do not disappear easily. Trust does not return automatically. Freedom can feel disorienting. The system manages risk effectively, but it does not erase experience. This reality complicates the narrative of safety. While Category A prisons may prevent immediate harm, they also shape the future in subtle ways. The costs are deferred rather than eliminated. And yet, despite these complexities, the system endures. It endures because fear of failure outweighs faith in alternatives. Because certainty feels safer than possibility. Because when the stakes are perceived as absolute, compromise becomes difficult. Britain's Category A prison system is not a moral conclusion. It is a practical one. It represents how far a society is willing to go to feel secure, how much control it is willing to impose, how much uncertainty it is willing to eliminate. In that sense, these prisons are not just places of confinement. They are mirrors. They reflect what society values most when faced with its greatest fears. They reveal how safety is prioritized, how trust is rationed, and how risk is managed when consequences feel irreversible. The question they leave behind is not whether Category A prisons work. They do. The question is what it costs to make them work, and whether that cost is one society is prepared to continue paying. Because as long as danger is defined as absolute, systems like this will remain. Quiet, controlled, uncompromising, not asking to be understood, only asking to be trusted.